There is a silence that exists just after a breath is released and before the next one is drawn. Quiet, suspended space. In that same space, between the holding on and the taking in, lives the entire delicate architecture of letting go. It is not an act of surrender, but a quiet, internal unclenching, a release of the hand from what was, from what could have been, from the imagined future now forever altered. To let go is to untie the boat from the dock, not to set it adrift, but to finally acknowledge the current was always carrying it somewhere else. This is not a story of loss, it is a story of release, a story of the quiet, profound, and deeply human psychology of opening one's hand. It begins not with a choice, but with a grip, an instinct. The infant's hand closes around a finger, a reflex as old as our species. This is the first, most fundamental language the body knows to hold. From this biological imperative, a psychological universe is constructed. We are built to attach, to bind our sense of safety to the world outside of ourselves. A voice becomes the song that soothes the night. A presence in a door becomes the promise of security. A particular street corner, a specific kind of light. Through a window, the scent of a certain soap on skin. These are not just memories. They are the bricks and mortar of a self, the invisible architecture that tells you where you end and the world begins, or if you end at all. This architecture is built silently day by day through a process of weaving. A person is woven into the fabric of a morning routine. A dream is woven into the identity of a future self. A belief is woven into the understanding of how the world works. The thread might be repetition, the quiet hum of the familiar. It might be intense joy, a moment of connection so sharp and bright, feels like a new color has been introduced to the spectrum. More often it is the subtle, cumulative weight of shared silence, of knowing. Glances of 1,000 unremarkable moments that together form the remarkable structure of a life shared. The self extends its tendrils outward, anchoring itself in people, in places, in ideas. To have this is to be someone, to be grounded. The mind, in its endless quest for efficiency and safety, reinforces these structures. It develops cognitive biases that act like loyal sentinels, guarding the architecture. Confirmation bias seeks out information that affirms the value of what is held, conveniently overlooking what threatens it. The sunk cost fallacy whispers persuasively of all the time, the emotion, the life already invested, making the thought of release feel not like freedom, but like an invalidation of one's own history. I have spent so long building this, the psyche argues. To walk away is to declare the building a waste. It is to make a ruin of my own past. And so the object of attachment ceases to be just an object. It becomes a part of the narrative. Letting go, then, is not merely about releasing a person, a job, or an outcome. It is perceived as a threat of disintegration. It feels like pulling a foundational stone from a carefully constructed wall and expecting the entire structure to remain standing. The body often understands this long before the mind can form the words. A tension in the shoulders becomes the physical manifestation of carrying a weight that is no longer there. A clenched jaw is the body's stubborn refusal to release a name that will not be spoken again. The anxiety that flares at the thought of release is not a sign of weakness. It is the alarm system of a self that believes it is about to be dismantled. This is why the initial impulse to let go so often meets a wall of internal resistance that feels both irrational and immense. It is not a failure of will, it is the defense of a citadel. The heart does not distinguish between a healthy attachment and a painful one with the clarity the mind so desperately seeks. It only knows that something is woven in, tied to the core, and that its removal will be a kind of surgery. To consider letting go is to stand at the edge of this self-constructed citadel and look into a terrifying, formless mist. Walls may be a prison, but they are a known prison. Their contours are familiar. Their pain has a name, and the human spirit will often choose a familiar confinement over an unknown freedom. The release happens, a word is spoken, a door is closed, a line is crossed. The object of the attachment is gone, physically or emotionally. The space it occupied is now empty. But the architecture does not simply vanish, it lingers as a phantom structure. Blueprint of a building that has been demolished, the mind a creature of pattern and habit continues to send signals to what is no longer there. This is the ghost limb, not the presence of the thing itself, but the persistent, aching echo of its shape. It appears in the mundane rituals of a day. The hand still reaches for a second coffee. Mug in the morning hovering over the empty countertop. The body turns to share it. Comment with a passenger seat that holds only silence and sunlight. The mind prepares. A story to tell later, a small daily observation that now has no destination and slowly dissolves unspoken. These are not conscious acts of remembrance, they are neuromuscular echoes, the deep programming of attachment playing out its script on a stage where the other actor has long since left. The ghost limb is felt most acutely not in the grand gestures of grief, but in these tiny, automatic movements of a life that has been intricately woven with another. The emotional landscape becomes a map of this phantom territory. A song playing in a supermarket can trigger a sudden visceral tightness in the chest, a wave of feeling with no conscious object until the memory catches up to the body's reaction. A scent. Air can transport one back to a specific evening, a specific room with a clarity that is both breathtaking and brutal. This is the ghost limb sensation, a pain that is neurologically real, emotionally vivid, yet attached to something that exists only in the past. The brain's limbic system, the seat of emotion and memory, does not operate on a linear timeline. It holds the past as an ever-present reality, and when triggered, it reactivates the full physiological response, as if the loss were happening anew. There is a perverse comfort in this pain. The ache of the ghost limb, while agonizing, is a form of connection. It is proof that what was lost was real, that it mattered. To feel the pain is to keep the connection alive, even if the connection is now only to an absence. Letting the pain fade can feel like a second, more profound loss, the loss of the loss itself. It is the final surrender of the bond. So the mind, in its desperate loyalty, may cling to the grief. It may replay the memories, both good and bad, not out of masochism, but out of a fear of the final silence. The ghost limb becomes a placeholder, a way to keep the space occupied so that the terrifying void of the unknown cannot rush in. This is the central paradox of this stage. To heal, one must feel the pain fully, yet to feel the pain fully is to reinforce the neural pathways that keep the ghost alive. It is a tightrope walk between honoring what was and capitulating to a phantom. The self becomes a cartographer, meticulously mapping the contours of an absence, learning every trigger, every echo, every hollow space where a presence used to be. This map is not the territory of the present, but it is a necessary one to draw, for it is only by knowing the precise shape and reach of the ghost limb that one can finally begin the slow, delicate work of retraining the mind to acknowledge its presence without being governed by its ache. Beneath the poetry of the ghost limb, beneath the ache of memory and the hollows of habit, lies the physical stage where this drama unfolds. The human brain. It is not a metaphor to say that attachments are carved into its very matter. They exist as intricate networks of neurons firing in familiar sequences, strengthened by repetition and emotion until they become superhighways of thought and feeling. To ask the brain to let go is to ask it to abandon its most efficient routes and to blaze a trail through a dense, uncharted wilderness. It is a physiological, not just a philosophical, rebellion. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped region deep within the brain, acts as the sentinel. Its primary language is not reason but survival. It registers the loss of an attachment, any significant shift in the familiar landscape, as a potential threat. The absence of a person, the collapse of a routine, the invalidation of a core belief. These are not mere disappointments to the amygdala. They are seismic events in the ecosystem of the self. In response, it triggers a cascade of stress hormones, cortisol, and adrenaline, preparing the body for perceived danger. The anxiety that accompanies letting go, the tightness in the chest, the hypervigilance. This is not a sign of a weak character. It is the ancient biological alarm system of an organism that feels its security has been compromised. This alarm system fortifies the neurological anchor, the brain seeking to resolve the dissonance ensued. The alarmed amygdala will often pull thoughts back towards the source of the attachment. It's a futile attempt to solve the unsolvable, to replay the scenario in search of a different outcome. Each repetition, each cycle of rumination, however painful, fires the same neural pathways, and in the brain, what fires together wires together. The painful thought of the loss becomes more and more entrenched. Not because one wants to suffer, but because the brain is desperately trying to process threat by following the well-worn familiar paths. The anchor is not just the memory of what was lost, it is the entire, self-reinforcing neurological loop of alarm, recollection, and distress. The opposite of this anchored state is not willpower but neuroplasticity. It is the brain's inherent, if sometimes sluggish, capacity to change. Letting go on a neurological level is the process of neuroplasticity in action. It is the conscious, deliberate effort to build new pathways. It begins not with a grand declaration of freedom, but with a single, quiet thought redirected. It is the moment one notices the mind traveling down the well-worn road of regret and makes a conscious choice to focus instead on the sensation of breath entering the body or the details of a tree outside the window. This is not avoidance, it is the active construction of a new neural trail. With each redirection, a new, faint pathway is carved. At first, it is fragile, overgrown, and difficult to traverse. The mind will default again and again to the familiar superhighway of the attachment, but with repetition, the new pathway becomes clearer, wider, easily accessed. The brain begins to learn that the trigger, the song, the place, the time of day can lead to a different destination, a state of present moment awareness, or a neutral observation instead of the old, familiar plunge into anguish. The neurological anchor does not disappear. Its shape remains etched in the circuitry, but its power to hold the entire vessel in place diminishes as new currents are discovered and new shores are gradually, patiently mapped onto the very fabric of the mind. At the heart of the struggle to release something lies a deeply ingrained and often invisible belief, the belief in one's own capacity to control. It is a silent contract the mind writes with the universe, a promise that if one is good enough, careful enough, or vigilant enough, one can dictate the outcomes of life. The attachment then is not merely to a person or a thing, but to the illusion of the outcome it represented. Letting go feels like tearing up this contract, admitting a fundamental powerlessness over the external world and facing the terrifying reality of uncertainty without a shield. This need for control often masquerades as responsibility or caring. It is the relentless mental rehearsal of conversations, the meticulous planning for every conceivable contingency, the attempt to manage the feelings and choices of others through one's own behavior. It is the belief that by holding on tightly enough, by worrying intensely enough, one can prevent the feared outcome from occurring. The grip, however painful, is seen as a form of agency. To loosen it feels like a dereliction of duty, a surrender to chaos. The mind becomes a fortress, and the act of holding on is the constant, exhausting work of manning the walls against an unpredictable world. The tyranny is in the exhaustion. The energy required to maintain this illusion is immense. It is a tax levied on attention, on emotional reserves, on the simple capacity to be present. The body remains in a state of low-grade alarm, the shoulders perpetually braced for a blow that may or may not come. The mind, trapped in its loops of planning and worrying, misses the texture of the present moment, the taste of food, the warmth of sunlight, the quiet comfort of a breath drawn and released without agenda. Life becomes a problem to be solved rather than an experience to be lived. The turning point is not a dramatic event, but a quiet internal collapse. It is the moment of profound fatigue, when the cost of maintaining the fortress becomes greater than the fear of what lies outside its walls. It is the realization that the attempt to control has not, in fact, led to security, but to a smaller, more anxious life. The very thing one sought to prevent, the pain of loss, the sting of failure, has become a constant companion in the Form of the fear itself. The struggle has not been a noble fight, it has been a prison of one's own making. This is the dawning understanding that control was always a mirage. One cannot control the actions of another, the flow of time, the unfolding of events outside one's own small sphere of influence. The only thing that ever truly belonged to the self was the capacity to choose a response. The realization is not one of defeat, but of a profound and sobering clarification, the energy that was once poured into the futile effort of managing the unmanageable begins to pool, available now for a different purpose. Hand does not open because it is forced, but because the weight of the thing it has been clutching has finally become too heavy to bear any longer. It does not arrive with a trumpet's blast or a sudden flash of light. It is not a victory. The surrender point is a quiet, internal yielding. It is the moment the fight simply leaves, not out of defeat, but out of a profound and final exhaustion. The ropes of resistance pulled, taut for so long, go slack. There is no more energy for the mental arguments, for the reruns of the past, for the desperate bargains with a future that refuses to be bargained with. It is a state of emotional and psychological ceasefire. The war is over, not because a side has won, but because the battlefield has been recognized as a place where no victory was ever possible. This is not the same as giving up. Giving up is an act of despair, a collapse backward into bitterness. Surrender is a gentle falling forward into what is true. It is the acceptance of a simple, unadorned fact. This is the reality of the situation. The person is gone. Opportunity has passed. The expected outcome will not come to be. There is no longer struggle against this fact. The mind, having exhausted all its strategies of control and resistance, finally stops arguing with reality. In that silence, a strange and unexpected peace begins to seep into the cracks. It is the peace of no longer fighting a gravity that was always there. The body often registers this shift before the mind can name it. A breath is drawn that feels, for the first time in a long time, like it reaches the bottom of the lungs. The jaw unclenches, the perpetual knot in the stomach loosens its grip. The physical tension that was the embodiment of the struggle simply dissipates, leaving behind a hollowed out stillness. It is not a feeling of happiness, but a feeling of cessation. The constant, draining noise of internal conflict has been switched off, and the resulting quiet is both vast and disorienting. In this quiet, a new kind of space opens up. For so long, the entire mental and emotional landscape was occupied by the object of the attachment and the battle to keep it. Now, that territory is empty. It is not the terrifying void once feared, but a neutral, open field. It is a space free from the projections of the past and the anxieties of the future. It is simply space, and in that space a faint curiosity can begin to stir. Not a plan, not a new attachment, but a simple, quiet question. What is here now without that? This is the essence of the surrender point. It is the transition from being defined by what one is holding on to being defined by the open, receptive capacity of one's own awareness. The identity is no longer the one who is fighting this loss, but simply the one who is here. It is a return to the bare canvas of the self, stripped of a story that had become too heavy to carry. The hand has not yet learned what it will do now that it is empty. It only knows for the first time the feeling of its own openness, the lightness of not carrying a weight it was never meant to hold. Surrender is a moment. Letting go is the practice that follows. It is the quiet, deliberate, and often repetitive work of building a new life in the space that surrender cleared. It is not a single act of will, but 1,000 small acts of redirection, a daily gentleness applied to a mind and a heart still tender from the fight. The ghost limb will still twitch. The old neural pathways will still light up, bright and insistent. The practice is not to never feel the pull of the old anchor, but to learn over and over to choose a different direction. This practice lives in the mundane. It is the conscious decision to not drive by the old house, to take a different route to work that doesn't pass a certain cafe. It is the act of putting a photograph away, not in anger, but with the quiet respect one shows an artifact from a past civilization. It is the gentle but firm redirection of a thought that begins to spiral into a familiar story of blame or regret. We are not going there today. The mind learns to whisper to itself, this is not repression, it is curation, it is the active stewardship of one's own attention, pulling it back again and again from the haunted past and into the tangible present. The present moment becomes the primary tool, the feel of warm water on skin. Shower, the intricate pattern of steam rising from a teacup, the specific weight and texture of a book in one's hands. These are not distractions, they are anchors of a new and different kind. They do not hold one in place with the chains of memory, but ground one in the reality of what is true now. The breath is the most fundamental of these anchors, each inhalation a gentle arrival, each exhalation a miniature practice. Release, the mind wanders as minds do back to the old pain. The practice is to notice it has wandered and to guide it back without criticism to the sensation of the breath. This simple ancient act is a neurological repatterning. It is the quiet cellular work of teaching the brain that safety can be found in the present, not in the reconstructed past. There will be days when the practice feels futile, days when the old ache returns with the force of a tide and the new pathways feel like fragile threads across a chasm. On these days, the practice shifts. It becomes not about redirection, but about allowance. It is the practice of sitting with the sorrow without being consumed by it, of letting the wave of grief pass through the body, observing its sensations, the tightness in the throat, the heat behind the eyes, the hollow in the chest, as temporary weather in the vast sky of the self. The practice is to not add a second layer of suffering by resisting the first, to simply say this too is here, and then to watch it change as all things do. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the new pathways widen, the moments of presence begin to outnumber the moments of haunted recollection. The empty space ceases to be a void and becomes a room one is slowly, carefully learning to inhabit. New objects may find their way into this room, a new interest, a new rhythm, a new, less burdensome connection. They are not replacements, they are new pieces of furniture in a life that has been rearranged. The practice of release is the lifelong commitment to this rearrangement, to the understanding that to hold anything lightly is to hold it truly, and that an open hand is, finally, ready to receive what is actually here. What remains after the long work of release is not nothing, it is space, a quiet, clean, and fertile emptiness. The ghost limb no longer aches with a phantom presence, but fades into the background, a healed-over scar that is part of the body's history but no longer dictates its movement. The neurological anchors have been pulled from the seabed, and the vessel, once held fast, now floats freely, responsive to the currents of the present. This space is the final and most profound reward for the courage of letting go. It is the clearing in the dense forest of the self, where light finally reaches the forest floor. This space is not a destination, but a new beginning. It is characterized by a quality of lightness, a subtle unburdening that permeates one's being. Decisions are no longer weighed down by the heavy chains of the past. Encounters are not filtered through the lens of old wounds. There is a capacity to meet the world as it is, not as it was or as one feared it might be. The mind, no longer consumed with managing the past or controlling the future, settles into a gentle, observant presence. It is the feeling of a room after the windows have been thrown open, the stale air replaced by a fresh, moving breeze. In this openness, a different kind of knowing emerges. It is not the knowing of attachment which seeks to possess and define. It is the knowing of connection which seeks only to appreciate and understand. One can look back on what was released and see it not as a failure or a loss, but as a chapter. It can be held in memory without the sharp edge of craving or resentment. Its lessons are integrated, its pains are acknowledged as part of the shaping. There is a gratitude for the experience, not for its ending, but for its role in the larger narrative of a life. It is a gratitude that coexists peacefully with the acceptance of its conclusion. This space is not meant to remain empty. It is a vessel waiting to be filled with the authentic and the immediate. It is the space where creativity, long stifled by the noise of Struggle can begin to whisper again. It is the space where new connections can form. Not from a place of need, but from a place of wholeness. It is the space where one can finally hear the quiet, persistent voice of one's own intuition, a voice that was drowned out for years by the clamor of what should be and what must be held. The psychology of letting go then reveals its ultimate truth. It was never about loss. It was always about return, a return to the fundamental, unadorned self that exists before. And after its attachments, it is the rediscovery of a capacity that was always there, but had been forgotten, the capacity to be here in this moment with this breath. This body to be open, receptive, and unafraid of the vast, beautiful, and unpredictable landscape of a life that is, at last, truly one's own. The hand is open, the sky is clear, and in the space that remains, everything is possible.